Yesterday, my oldest son came into my office. I was sitting at my desk at home, and I was actually doing some final preparation for the message this morning. And he walked in the office and said, "Hey, Dad, so we going golfing today?" And I said, in my head, don't do this to me. Like, don't make me have to make this decision. But I also immediately thought, well, it's supposed to rain all day today. And so I said, well, it's supposed to rain. He goes, nope, it's not supposed to rain until after 3 o'clock, and there's tee times available. And I was like, oh man, this is an easy decision because my boys won't be home forever to come in randomly on a spontaneous moment and say, hey, let's go golf. And so Braden and I decided we were going to go golf. So we did, and we got there, and apparently everybody else thought it was going to rain too, because we got to the first tee box and we didn't see anybody the entire round. It was an incredible day of golf. We enjoyed it. We had a great time. One of the benefits, though, was that as we were golfing, we got to slow down a little bit. We got to kind of take our time, which means that we got to find lost golf balls and lots of lost golf balls. And I don't know if you know a whole lot about the golf world. I know many of you do because you play golf. But for those that don't, to find a golf ball can be a really valuable thing, because sometimes if you're talking about a premium golf ball, those are like $5 a piece. Okay, so to find a premium golf ball on the golf course in good condition, that's a big deal. And so we started to find some nice golf balls, and as we continued to play, the golf game was average, mediocre at best, but the ball retrieval was working really, really well. And so we got to one particular hole, and we're finding different golf balls. We're getting excited about, I'm replenishing the golf bag. I'm getting golf balls ready for Braden and Cam because they both like to swing the club at a golf ball, and golf balls aren't cheap. So we were excited about what we were finding. And we got to this one particular hole, and Braden had the ball retriever, and he was reaching for a ball that was in the water. And as he scoops it out, he scoops out another one. And so he's like, man, there's a lot of golf balls in here. I'm like, yeah, there is. And so I look down, and as I look down, I'm kind of in this muddy spot right next to this water, this kind of creek. And I see about that much of a white golf ball just sticking out above the surface of the mud. And so I kind of kick at it, and it's a golf ball. And it's a nice golf ball. It's a premium golf ball, a Titleist Pro V1. Some of you know what that is. Those are not cheap. And so I was like, oh, sweet. This is the score. As I pull that one out, just beneath it, I see another one right underneath the previous one. So I grabbed that one. As I grabbed that one, I see two more. It was like a silted pile of golf balls. And so I'm on my knees scooping golf balls with my hand, just one after another, just tossing them on the bank, covered in mud. I don't even know what they look like. I just know the first one I found was a Pro V1. There's got to be more Pro V1s. I started seeing some. So I'm like 30 golf balls in. Braden walks up and he's like, Dad, are you really scooping those out with your hands? Like, I don't know if he's more disappointed in me in that moment or when I tell terrible pastor dad jokes from the stage. I could tell he was a little bit just kind of like, this is a little bit ridiculous. You're a grown man digging for golf balls. And so sure enough, I did. We kept growing, and he grabbed more, and we had them all up on the bank. We put them in a bag, got them home. We were excited because we saw a lot of Titleist Pro V1s, a lot of TaylorMade TP5s, which are also expensive golf balls. We were pumped. So we get home, we're washing these golf balls in this bucket. And as we're washing these golf balls off, we start to notice that they're really not that great of condition. Like, they're not really that usable. Even the premium ones. What we discovered, and I didn't know this until yesterday, that if a Pro V1 sits in water for too long, it becomes unusable. They basically they grow these like bumps once you take them out of the water, which we didn't see when we first got them. But then when we got home, they looked like they had some kind of skin disorder or something. I don't know. It was weird, but they weren't usable, and there were like 20 of them. And so all of a sudden, we had all of these golf balls that we were so excited about. And then when I started to look at the bucket, next to the bucket of about 100 other golf balls I had at home, and I added the 130 golf balls that we found yesterday to that, I realized I've got a lot of golf balls that don't have a lot of value. And I was kind of disappointed. Now, there's a handful that are good, but most of them are garbage. And I was bummed. I was disappointed because what we had spent our time investing in, trying to find all these golf balls, I was so excited. I disappointed my son, ended up being completely worthless and inadequate. Didn't live up to what I thought it was going to be. I don't know if you've ever had a situation like that where you've invested your time, you've invested energy and effort and emotion and maybe even resources into something, and you got to the other side of it and the results were inadequate. The return was inadequate. The ROI was not what you had hoped that it would be. I want to turn to Luke chapter 19 and look at a story that's probably familiar if you've been in church at all over the course of your life, and kind of look at a story of a man who I think is experiencing just that. And I would bet that every single one of us in the room today, we have made a bad investment at some point in our lives. Maybe it was a financial investment. You invested your money and resources into something, you got on the other end, and it provided a negative return. You were really disappointed. Maybe it was a relational investment. Maybe that person is sitting next to you. Don't point if they are. But maybe there was some kind of investment of time and energy and emotion into something that only left you in a place of disappointment. I think we see this exact thing happen in the story in Luke 19 with a man named Zacchaeus. It's probably a name that you're familiar with. And so I want to read through and unpack this story today. And I think as we do, as we walk through 10 verses, I think you could break this up into chapters. These are almost like significant moments, significant chapters in Zacchaeus' life that are taking place that I think we can find ourselves in sometimes. We can find ourselves in each one of these chapters at some point in our life. So let's start in verse 1. Luke 19, verse 1 says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. And there was a man called by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was rich. So, chapter 1 is before Zacchaeus meets Jesus. Okay, this is the first chapter. We learn a little bit about this man named Zacchaeus. What are a few things that we learn? Well, based on what this says, he's living in Jerusalem or in Jericho. Jericho was known as probably one of the wealthier places that Jesus ever spent any time in his time on this earth. Zacchaeus lived there. He was rich because he was a tax collector, but not just any tax collector, but the chief tax collector, which leads us to believe that he was probably someone who most people did not like. His family probably had disowned him, didn't want to have anything to do with him because he was a Jewish man collecting taxes for the Roman government. But on top of collecting taxes for the Roman government, he was allowed to add a little bit more that he could keep for himself. So he was basically adding surcharges on top of the taxes so that he could get rich himself off of his own people. It's the chief tax collector. He was the chief. That means he was good at it. And he had probably been incredibly successful from a financial standpoint. A couple other things that we know about tax collectors in this day. If that's all true about Zacchaeus, what we just read, it also meant that he could not go into the synagogue, which means he couldn't gather in a place with other people of faith to worship God, to experience God, to celebrate who God is. He wasn't allowed in there. He was an outcast. He was kept at a distance. He couldn't interact with his own people. No one was inviting him over for dinner. No one was going to his house for dinner. He was someone who was probably isolated and alone unless he chose to hang out with other people who were considered corrupt in the society that he lived in or other people like him. This is where we find Zacchaeus. This is the life that he's in. But then something begins to happen. We can begin to learn a little bit more about him. In verse 3, it says, Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, and he was unable due to the crowd because he was short in stature. Now, if you grew up in church at all as a kid, you've already had the song probably come to mind. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and I see some of you kind of bouncing to the tune. You know it. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I'm not going to make fun of Zacchaeus today for that. I'm not going to make any short jokes. I'm not going to belittle him at all. But there is something about Zacchaeus that I think is fascinating. He's interested in seeing this man named Jesus. There's something about Jesus that he knows or something he has heard, and he wants to see him. And he knows that Jesus is coming down the street. I don't know if it was the miracles he had heard about, how Jesus had taken some who were blind and had restored their sight, or it had let the lame walk again, or raised the dead back to life. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was his teachings, his preachings about the love of God. There was something intriguing to Zacchaeus about Jesus, which also leads me to believe that if that's the case, and if that's true, with all that Zacchaeus had, it leads me to believe that there was something in his life that he didn't feel satisfied with. He didn't feel satisfied with all that he was and everything that he had, and that maybe there was something else out there that he needed. Something was lacking. He had the big job, he had big money, but it wasn't enough. But there's a problem we see in verse 3. The problem was there's a big crowd, and he's short in stature. A few years ago, we bought my youngest son, who is a Cowboys fan. I know I have misled my child in the ways of the evil one, and excuse me. But we bought him for Christmas one year. We decided to buy him tickets to a Dallas Cowboys game. We love going to sporting events. We're a big sports family. We love just competition, all the things. And so we like to go see our teams play, the teams that we like. And we had never been to a Cowboys game. He wanted to go, and so we started looking for tickets. Anytime I started to look for tickets for a sporting event for my kids, or really anything we went to, especially when they were little, I was always really careful because I wanted to make sure that I found a seat that they could see, that they would have a good view, that they could see what was going on in the field so they could fully experience everything there was to experience at the competition. So we bought tickets. We got to the stadium. I tricked Cam and I told him that we had seats all the way up in the nosebleeds. We had better seats that were a little bit closer. And so he was surprised. We get down there. We're excited. He's pumped. We can see the field. We got there early, watching everybody warm up. And then the game began to start. And I don't know why, but it seems like the section we were sitting in was the section that all the opposing fans were sitting in because it was full of Detroit Lions fans. And one thing I learned about Detroit Lions fans is they're a lot like Aggies. They like to stand the whole time. And it was like the whole game for an NFL football game, they're standing, which was fine, except my son was small at the time and was not able to see. That was disappointing to me. But like anyone who maybe struggles to see somewhere, you have to get resourceful. And so, fortunately, at Cowboy Stadium, there's a 60-yard wide television hanging from the ceiling that really everybody watches, anyways. Nobody's watching the live action on the field. But Zacchaeus is doing something similar. He's having to get resourceful because he can't see over the crowd. Because he's smaller than most people, he's not able to see. But not only can he not see over the crowd, I'm not sure he wanted to try to get in front of the crowd so that he could see in front because of who he was, the reputation that he had, and what people thought about him. He probably didn't want a bunch of people that didn't like him standing behind him as his attention's focused on what's ahead. So what does he do? It tells us that he, in verse 4, says he ran ahead and climbed up in a sycamore tree in order to see him because he was about to pass through that way. A couple of important notes here that we might miss if we're not careful. One, Zacchaeus runs. This was not normal in the Jewish culture. It was not normal for a Jewish man to be running in public. It would have almost been considered offensive. I mean, even today in our culture, you don't see men just running around randomly. If they're running, they're probably exercising, trying to burn some calories, or they're running from something that's trying to attack them, running from a dog, or they're running because they're about to get robbed, or they're trying to rob someone. I don't know. But there's a reason for them running. This is a unique situation. Someone in this man's position, who is a government official, is running ahead. That's not normal. This is an unusual situation. But not only is he running ahead, it says that he climbs a tree. Now, Zacchaeus is smart. He does what he needs to do to see what he wants to see. But I think it tells us something about Zacchaeus. I think we can learn something about him as we understand that. I think one, it shows us that there's humility in his life. Someone who had lived most of his life in an incredibly selfish way, all of a sudden is a grown man climbing up in a tree. When was the last time you were walking through your neighborhood and saw a random adult man hanging out in a tree? It doesn't happen. It would be awkward. It would be weird, especially a man in his position. So he climbs up in a tree, knowing people are going to see him. This is a little bit risky, risking mockery. A man who no one cares for is living in a sense of humility and putting himself in a vulnerable situation. Why? Because there's something about Jesus that he was looking for. There's something about Jesus that maybe he was hoping to find. It's almost childlike. All of a sudden, a man who had probably been controlled by pride his whole life is not letting pride control him anymore. And so he responds with humility, which I think is an important note for us because sometimes it's our pride and our ego that are the biggest barriers to experiencing Jesus in our own lives because we think we know better, because we want to maintain a specific image for ourselves. And by doing so, we're trying to push Jesus further away. What I think is happening in this moment, the reason I think he's landed in a place of humility and vulnerability is because he's landed in a place where he's recognized the emptiness of the life that he sold himself out to. Several years ago, I read the story of Robin Williams, and many of you know the story of Robin Williams. You've watched movies with Robin Williams. You've seen Mrs. Doubtfire. He was a man who brought life to the TV screen. He brought life to films. He was hilarious. He was funny. What's fascinating about the article I read several years ago is that offstage, people said he was actually quite opposite of that, especially in his later years. His son said that his moods would rise and fall with the movie reviews that he would read about himself and the movies that he was in. At one point, he told his wife, "You're only as good as your last performance." And then he confided in a friend that he didn't know how to be funny anymore. He'd gotten to a place in life where he didn't know how to be funny anymore. And then finally, we know the story, he tragically took his own life. It's fascinating to me. It's devastating to me someone that we would look at and think, he has it all. He's figured it out. He's been successful and yet miserable. I've never been to a dog race. Maybe some of you have. I've seen them on TV. And I oftentimes wonder, it's fascinating to me, and maybe my mind just thinks about weird things, and it's probably true. Maybe you're like that, but I often think about certain things like this, like why does a dog continue to chase the fake rabbit that's on a rail, going down the side? I mean, you know how it goes. The rabbit takes off, is on the rail, and the dogs are released from the gate. They lose their minds. They begin to chase after the rabbit, and they get all the way to the other end. The rabbit disappears, and they're thinking, I didn't catch it. Another day, and I didn't catch the rabbit. And then the next day, they do the same thing. They get in the gate, the rabbit takes off, the gate's open, they lose their minds, they run, they try to chase after the rabbit. Every single day. This is where my mind goes. Like at some point, do the dogs never learn? Are dogs really that dumb? And I know some of you are cat people and you would say, yes, they are. Cats are smarter than dogs. But hang with me. Here's my point in all that. Every single day our alarms go off, and it's almost like our alarms go off, and it says, here comes the rabbit. And we start chasing the promotion, chasing the corner office, chasing the new boyfriend, the new girlfriend, the new car, the new house, the new team, the new opportunity, the promotion. We're chasing. You know what's interesting is there are rare times where the dog actually catches the rabbit. And I read years ago that when a dog catches the rabbit, that it never runs as fast as it ran before it caught the rabbit. So maybe dogs are pretty smart, at least a little smarter than I can be sometimes. Because sometimes I can catch the rabbit and then wake up the next day to chase another rabbit and to chase another rabbit, to only get to the end and realize that the rabbit was not capable of fulfilling everything that I thought it could fulfill. It was fake, it was phony, it was inadequate, it was a poor investment. I wonder if this is where Zacchaeus was. And all of a sudden he realizes maybe this man has something that I'm looking for. This man they call Jesus. Story gets a little crazy. Zacchaeus is up in the tree. In verse 5, it says, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house, which I think leads us to chapter 2. Zacchaeus meets Jesus. We know a lot about Zacchaeus, but now Zacchaeus has an encounter with Jesus. Now, there's not a lot of a description about what happens at this scene, so it leaves a little bit of room for imagination. But this is a fascinating scene. It's almost like the whole world probably stops in this moment. And I'm sure the crowd, as Jesus comes to the tree and looks up at Zacchaeus, for the very first time, somebody's looking up to him, not because he's short in stature, but because of the life that he has chosen to live for himself. And Jesus looks up at him and calls him by name. And the crowd's probably thinking, oh, it's on. Like Zacchaeus is about to get told. He's about to finally get what's coming to him. This is the moment we've been waiting for. Jesus looks up to Zacchaeus and he doesn't say, Zacchaeus, shame on you. I can't believe you. You're such a disappointment to me. Instead, he says, Zacchaeus, I want to come to your house today. What? He just was wanting to catch a glimpse of Jesus. He just wanted to maybe see if there was anything about this Jesus that might be valuable to him, to try to discover something, to maybe try to find some answers, to maybe find forgiveness or find purpose in life that he thought he would find in everything else he'd already done that he'd failed to continue to find. And I often wonder, this isn't something that's specific in scripture. And so, but it's just where my mind goes. I wonder sometimes if Matthew, who was one of the disciples of Jesus, when he decided to leave everything and follow Jesus, I wonder if the chief tax collector was paying attention. I wonder if the chief tax collector said, man, I can't believe this guy would have all of this and yet would choose to walk away from it to follow this man. What is it about this man that would make somebody want to do that? Like, I wonder if that's what got his attention. So he finds himself in this place. Notice it said at the place, and the procession stops there. And Jesus knows his name. How does he know his name? Well, maybe there were rumors about the chief tax collector that Jesus had heard. Maybe Jesus was flexing his divine power. We don't know for sure. But what we do know is that we know that Jesus stopped at this specific place and he called this specific man by his exact name. He has an encounter with him. It's not general. It's very specific. It's not coincidental. It's not accidental. He says, Zacchaeus, I'm not here today to make an appointment to get on your calendar sometime in the future. I am here because I must spend time with you today. I must stay at your house today. There is absolutely no way Zacchaeus anticipated that this is how the day would go. But Jesus wanted to spend time with Zacchaeus. He said, Zacchaeus, I see you. I see what's going on inside of you. I know why you're here today. And he probably had felt like everybody else had written him off, and this is just who he would always be. But this is an opportunity for Jesus, an encounter with Jesus, to begin to change the course of his life. We see this. I think that's true for some, maybe here today. Maybe you feel at a place where you're so disconnected, but you're here. You're here and you're listening. Maybe there is something to this. Like I see this in other people. Maybe there is something to this, and you sit and you're in close proximity, but you're just not sure yet. I just want you to know that Jesus is a personal Jesus. He's a personal God. He is calling you by name, inviting you in. He wants to meet with you. Look how Zacchaeus responds in verse 6. It says, and he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. This is a little bit bizarre to me. Zacchaeus comes down this tree. He's operating in a place of humility, an incredible, vulnerable position. He gets invited by Jesus to go to his house, not Jesus' house, but his own house. And he's joyful about it. That's interesting to me. If I walked up to you after we're done here in just a moment and I said, hey, I'm coming over to your house today for lunch. Is that cool? Like for some of you, you're like, oh, that's great. I can't wait. Like you love to host. Your house is always in order, ready for someone just to stop in. The rest of us, there's a mild panic attack that's going on the inside of us because you start to think to yourself, oh my gosh, what does the house look like? Are all the clothes put away? Are the blankets folded? Is the trash been taken out? Is the sink full of dishes? Oh my gosh, what does the house look like? What does it smell like? They're going to show up, and this is a big deal. Why do we panic? Here's why we panic. We panic because we're fearful that people will judge who we are, judge things about us based on what they see in our house. It's interesting to me that Zacchaeus is joyful about Jesus showing up at his house, giving Jesus access to the house to come in and see the most vulnerable places, the most personal spaces in his life. Why is that? I think it's because there's an opportunity to experience the grace of Jesus that he's already experiencing. Not just when he gets to the house, but just simply being seen by Jesus in the tree, you see grace on display. Which I think leads us to chapter 3. There's an invitation worth accepting. There's an invitation on the table to Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus accepts the invitation. I think what's important to understand is not only is this a big deal in the Jewish culture, because in the Jewish culture, this would have been an opportunity for Jesus to say, I'm committed to spending time with you. I'm committed to care and to love and to live life with you. Like I care about your life, Zacchaeus, and I want to spend time with you. So to go have a meal with someone was a really big deal. That's a big deal for us today. There are people that you work with, maybe in the workplace, but it doesn't mean that you go to lunch with all the people that you work with. You go to lunch with the people that you enjoy, that you like. When you go to school, you're in class with a bunch of different people. It doesn't mean you like all the people you're in class with, but who do you sit with at lunch? You sit with the people that you like. Jesus is choosing Zacchaeus, the one that was probably least likely to be chosen in the eyes of the religious. Jesus chooses. It was his commitment to care and to love Zacchaeus. He sees Zacchaeus. Look at verse 7, though. When the people saw this, they all began to what? Complain, saying, he has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Imagine that. Jesus ticked somebody off, specifically the religious, which I think this is an opportunity. It's really easy to look at this story and be like, man, come on. Like, how are they going to be so upset? Why would they be so frustrated with Jesus for doing this? But let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of the religious for a moment. This is the man who has stolen from their grandmother's retirement fund to pad his account. This is the one who has made them have to eat beanie weenies and ramen noodles because they've had to go without because he's taken more for himself. These are the people that are having to live beyond or in less than what they feel like they deserve while he lives in luxury up on a hill in his mansion. So they have reason to be frustrated with Zacchaeus. They have reason to be frustrated that Jesus chose Zacchaeus. Jesus, why would you choose him? Which I think leads us to two assumptions. The first one is he's not worthy. Jesus, Zacchaeus is not worthy of your time. He's not worthy of your attention, which also leads to the second assumption that somebody is worthy. If he's not worthy, then I assume someone is. But the reality of the gospel, a clear understanding of the gospel, reminds us that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. In other words, no one is worthy of Jesus' time, of Jesus' affection, of his love, of his grace, of his mercy. Not you, not the person sitting next to you, not anyone in your family, not the person standing on the stage right now, no one. And so, regardless of what they've done or what they might do or what their potential is, none of us are worthy. But this is the gospel. This is the heart of the gospel that you see in Jesus. He seeks Zacchaeus out anyways. The only reason you and I have a seat at the table with God is because of the grace of God, because of his choosing. And Zacchaeus is the ideal candidate for an encounter with Jesus on this day. Why? Because there's humility and there's acknowledgement of need. He recognizes he needs something. There's something that he's looking for that he can find in Jesus. And Jesus knows that love precedes life change. Notice he doesn't say, hey, Zacchaeus, I need you to go clean up. I need you to get your life together and then let me know when you got it all figured out and I'll come over and have dinner with you. No, he says, Zacchaeus, I want to step into the messiness of your life now. I want to have dinner with you now. I want to meet with you. I want to stay with you now. His grace flies in first and life change happens second. This is what the gospel does. This is what life change looks like with the gospel impact. Why does Luke mention this? It's kind of interesting that he throws this verse in there because it's all about Zacchaeus and then it's about the crowd, the reaction of the crowd. Well, I think the biggest reason simply is this, is it's easy for us when we begin to walk with Jesus, with other people walking with Jesus, we can oftentimes become very inward focused. We can begin to look at what makes us comfortable, what our preferences are, what we think church should be like, and we forget the ones on the outside. We forget those that are maybe far from God, that haven't experienced the grace of God, that haven't experienced the life change because of the grace of God, that don't know the radical grace of Jesus. And so we'll get comfortable in our church gatherings and our church routines with our church friends and completely miss out. And we'll be a crowd of people keeping others from seeing who Jesus clearly is. My prayer is that Church Story would never be that kind of a church, which means even as we move into the next chapter and there's a new building that maybe has more comfortable chairs and more opportunities to plug in and gather together as church people, that even when we have a permanent home, that we never become so focused on what's happening in the building that we forget the people on the outside. That we continue to pursue with grace and mercy because we know that we're not worthy and everything that we have in Jesus is nothing of our own doing, but it's what he's given us. And we want to share that with the world around us. That's what we're called to do. Church, ecclesia is the word used for church in the Bible. It's a word that it means movement. Something is happening. This is the call for those who would call themselves followers of Jesus. Zacchaeus experiences something. He experienced this grace, and then he has an incredible response to that in verse 8. It says, but Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, which that's important. What does that mean? That means, behold, Lord, you are the authority now. You call the shots now. I no longer want to be in charge of my life. I want you to be in charge of my life. Why in the world would Zacchaeus say this? Because he's experienced something. Because grace stepped in, and radical grace leads to extravagant response, specifically when it comes to generosity. Look what he does. It says, behold, Lord, half of my possessions I am giving to the poor, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'm giving back 4 times as much. Now, Zacchaeus would have understood the religious system of the day. The Jewish custom was to give 10% of everything that you earned back to the temple activities so that they could function at the level they were supposed to. And so that was just kind of the expectation. That was the norm. But then they would give above that, and they would give towards the celebrations and the festivals and the feasts and all the things that they would do together as a people of faith and trusting God, and as they would care for orphans and care for widows. And generosity in this day was considered to be about 20% of their income. That's what was normal. Zacchaeus goes with 50%. He gives back more than what he is obligated to give back more than what the Jewish law would say. He says, I'm giving back 4 times to those who have hurt me. This is not normal. This is actually insane. It's extravagant and unnecessary. Why? Because he's responding to the graces that he's experienced, which I think is the final chapter. Chapter 4 is radical grace leads to extravagant generosity. There's so much to unpack in this verse. There's so much that we could spend time talking through, but I think what probably happened in this moment is Zacchaeus, as he's hanging out at his house with Jesus, as he's sitting there probably showing Jesus around his house, all the cool things that he has, he probably came to the realization at some point, wait a minute, this man knows everything about me. He knows everything that I've done, and yet he still chooses to fellowship with me. He continued to experience this kind of grace. And even in all that, Jesus says, I'm sticking around. And what Zacchaeus ultimately realizes is that he's found something that he values more than what he thought was most valuable. He's found something that lived up to the expectation, that was adequate in the return. When you begin to let Jesus in, you begin to see things differently. The light comes in and clarity begins to quickly show you new things, a new reality, a new understanding of the world around you. This is what's happening for Zacchaeus. His life is completely turned around. As he steps into each chapter, his life changes. He experiences something he could never experience on his own. And the result is an extravagant generosity. But notice, it's not that he's extravagantly generous with what he has so that he'll earn God's favor, so that he'll earn salvation from Jesus. He's generous as a result of experiencing the grace of Jesus. His generosity is the effect, not the cause. The cause is the grace that Jesus shows to the one who is least likely to be shown the grace. Giving is a response that shows your heart. You see Zacchaeus' heart in this. Verse 10 says, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. That's the reason Jesus showed up. Why is salvation in the house? Because Jesus showed up to the house. Jesus rescued and brought into community with God, with other peoples. He did what was necessary to rescue us from ourselves. He did the same thing for Zacchaeus. This is what he arrived to do. And most people believe that this happened about a week before Jesus was arrested and was put on the cross. So this was likely his last encounter with someone like this that we read about in Scripture. It's an incredible story, but why this text, why this story today? As we're continuing to move forward into the next chapter. Well, first, for some, today you might be Zacchaeus. Maybe you're not up in a tree. Maybe you're not a government worker. Maybe you are. But you're probably not wealthy if you are the government worker like Zacchaeus was. But you're in a place where you just trying to see, is all of this true? Is there something to this? Is there something valuable in this for me? Because everything else I've looked for value in, everything I've been seeking with my life is not living up to the expectation. Everything is bringing back a return that is inadequate. I hope you sense today that God is seeking after you, that maybe today this is the place where he's looking to you and he's calling you out by name, not by coincidence, not by accident. He's calling your name, saying, trust me. Receive the invitation. Let me come in and dwell in your house. Let me see the mess. Let me be in the vulnerable places. Experience the grace that I have, the mercy that I have, the love that I have for you. And then watch the life change that takes place as a result. Watch the pursuit of new purpose in your life as you experience who he is. Maybe that's where some are today. Maybe there's a handful today. That's where you're at. And you're at that line of, is today the day that I step across that line of faith? And I open the door and I invite him in because he's not looking for a time down the road later in the calendar. He's looking for today. Today is the day. And then for those of us who are already know Jesus, we're already walking with him. To know this kind of grace is to live to show this kind of grace. Love experienced is to be love extended. This is the call in our life. This is the purpose of our life. When we think about the next chapter, I think it's easy to land in a place where we just think about it as a fundraiser, as a way to contribute financially to something. And I understand that. And I'm not trying to just get you to give. I'm not just trying to prove something so that you'll write a bigger check, or that you'll think that maybe God will love you more, or maybe there'll be more honor to my name as I give a little bit more. That's not the motivation. The motivation is not that. Because generosity is the effect, not the cause. And so we're not doing any of this to earn or accomplish or manipulate God in any specific way. More importantly, if you've been changed by the grace of God, you've experienced Him, you've seen the impact that it's had on your life, then would we be committed to being a conduit of the grace of God, for the grace of God, to flow through us to make a difference in the world around us? Why is that important? Well, because Church Story is growing. Some of you have been around for a little bit and you've seen the growth. Some of you haven't been around as long. Church Story is growing. It's a group of ordinary people from day one who wanted to be a part of an extraordinary purpose that God has called us into. No one here has special power that no one else has. We're ordinary. And in that, God has been faithful to continue to work. And we've experienced growth. I can show you some of the statistics, and I'll just go ahead and tell you there's a typo on the screen. We realized that after we put the slides in. That's my fault. I made the slide. But you can see Sunday gathering growth. In 2023, at the end of 2023, we were averaging 265 people on a Sunday morning, showing up in this room and the kids' space down the hall. 2024, that jumped by 65% to 431. Last year in 2025, that continued to climb to 616, which is a 43% increase, which was interesting because most times in the third year that a church is launched, they start to plateau with growth. We didn't see that in 2025. 2026, not 2025. So far this year, we've seen a 19% increase in attendance, and we're just in the first 6 weeks of the year so far. So we've seen this growth. Not only that, but in our kids' areas, you can see the numbers continuing to kind of go up there, 42 to 80 to 121 for this year, 141. I would anticipate if this year is like any other year, we'll continue to see that number increase as we continue to grow, God willing. And maybe we don't grow anymore numerically, and that's okay. But as we don't grow numerically, I pray that we would continue to grow in the depth of our faith, in our understanding of the faith, that our understanding of who He is would continue to expand. You can see in our special needs ministry, the growth there once we launched that in the spring of 2024. We've seen growth there as we've served those in our community with special needs. Some incredible stories that come from that ministry. Continuing on into our youth ministry, one of the things I read this week is that youth ministries actually are the ministry in most new churches that struggle to grow at the same rate that the rest of the church is. I think that makes sense. There's not a consistent routine. There's not a consistent gathering place. It's difficult. It takes a lot of resources, a lot of time. And so despite all of that, we've continued to see our youth ministry grow and have an impact and make a difference with the ways that some of our youth have participated in things. 20 middle school, junior high, and high school students have been baptized since Church Story launched. That's what we were talking about last week. We want to see generations impacted through Church Story. This isn't just a next chapter for those of us that are already in it. It's for those to come later. This is an incredible opportunity. And the church is continuing to grow. And like I said earlier, we can't stay here. This place has been great for us. And there's a lot of great things about being here. But honestly, setting up the pipe and drape every single morning can be a little bit of a drag. We love hanging out together as we're setting up the pipe and drape, but it's a lot of work. But there will be a day that we'll have a permanent space, but not just to make it easy, but so that we can continue to help people know God in even greater ways, to grow together in relationship with each other and go and make a difference, not within the walls, but beyond the walls of wherever we gather. And so where we've landed is in a new building that will be about 31,000 square feet, right off of Cypress Heights Drive and Jurgen Road, I mentioned earlier. That's the initial renderings of what the outside of the space will look like. Very simple. We plan to use it for not just church gatherings, but we want to serve the community. We want to leverage what we have for the community's good with no strings attached. And so this is kind of what it looks like. You can see right there in the back at the top of the screen, that's Tomball West High School. That's how close we will be to Tomball West High School, the opportunities that we'll have in the days to come as we connect and continue to grow that relationship with not just them, but the other two schools across the highway. An incredible opportunity to impact thousands of families for decades to come. It all comes at a cost, a financial cost. And so where we've landed with a lot of conversation and with the help of some outside consulting and also wiser people in our church than Wes Jackson, have landed in a place where we feel like it's time to raise $7 million over the next 3 years. Even as I say that, and I've said that I don't know how many times yet, it still kind of makes my heart stop for a moment. I'm like, man, that's a lot of money. $7 million. This is significant for a 3.5-year-old church. $7 million that has an operating budget of $1.3 million. This is a huge step of faith. This is a significant step that we feel called to take together. But as a church, we want to come together and we want to give above what we already give, what we already tithe, to go beyond where we are currently. That's the dream. And listen, if you're here for the first time, you're still getting familiar with Church Story, you're off the hook, okay? So you can just chill out and relax. This doesn't apply to you. There's no pressure. If you're visiting from out of town, you're plugged into another church, I would encourage you to find out where you can invest your time, your energy, your resources to the work that church is doing, wherever they are. But this is an opportunity for us to jump in and to make a difference in the community around us for generations to come. And this is above and beyond what we already give, what we already tithe. And I know the question is, well, what about tithing? Am I supposed to tithe? And I know there's an argument there, but Jesus talks about it. There's a whole conversation there. I'll just tell you what I do. Yes, I believe in the tithe. For me, I think that's what God has called me to do. I think that's what's right. So that's what we do. My family and I are talking and praying about what does our contribution look like to church to the next chapter. I don't like telling you that. I don't even like mentioning that's what we're considering doing, because I don't want it to feel like, well, this is what Wes does. Look at Wes. But I want you to know I'm not inviting you into something that we're not participating into. We want to lead out in this because we're all in this together. This is not my church. This is all of us in this together. I can't give you an update, and then I want you to see a story of a couple of people that have found friendship and have found purpose at Church Story as they've jumped in and served on a story team. But I want you to know, I told you I would do this last week. Today, I want to give you an update. I told you we're trying to raise $7 million over the next 3 years. So we're asking people to commit, to pledge over the 3 years, starting on March 1st, towards the $7 million. As of today, with the gifts that have already come in, before we've even specifically asked for all of them, and the pledges that we've already received, the small number of pledges so far, we're already sitting at $3.8 million combined. That blows my mind, and I think that's worth celebrating. That's unbelievable. Even as I say that, I have chills thinking about it, because I think it's just gratitude for the people of Church Story that believe in what God has called us to and are putting our faith to action with what we value most. And so I'm grateful, and also believing and praying that God is going to continue to provide, and we're going to get to the $7 million goal in the weeks ahead. But I want you to watch the story. I talked about ordinary people with extraordinary purpose. There's a lot of value in that, and God does some incredible things as we step into that. So watch Jessica and Katie's story before we close.
I tried several churches and didn't find a spot for me. And then when I went to Church Story, I found a place where I could belong. You didn't need to be anything special to be there or like live up to a certain standard. It was just a bunch of people who wanted to know Jesus better.
My husband and I really had just a longing to find a family, a church family. I remember the first weekend that we ended up at Church Story, and I looked at my husband and I said, okay, so what story team do we want to serve on? So week 3, we were already plugged in. Birdie reached out to me and said, do you want to join the elementary team? And I said, sure. From having been a previous first grade teacher, that was right up my alley. I kind of felt that that was a sign from God that this was a place for us.
I had a lot of preconceived notions about what stepping into a service role would be from where I was before. And so in my mind, I was like, I don't know if I can do that well in this season of teaching kindergarten. I don't know if I can teach and be present and on all day, every day, and then also do the same on Sundays. Tyler reached out and he kind of explained that that wasn't the expectation. Be there to support and help the leads that were already in place and, love on the kiddos. And I'm like, and I could be a part of that.
Did you guys know each other before you started serving together?
So we did not know each other at all. Me and Megan, which is our other lead, we decided that we were going to go out to dinner and we were going to invite all the people on our team and just hang out with them, get to know them better. We went out to dinner, or we planned this dinner, and nobody showed up.
We did.
It was me and Jess. We showed up together. We probably sat there for an hour and a half talking. And then I said, hey, do you want to go shopping? I'm going right across the street in Fairfield to go shopping.
You want to follow me around while I return my jeans?
Yes. And then I feel like from there, really our friendship grew?
So we had another dinner.
Wait, like a month later. So we were still very new to friendship.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're sitting there eating and we're just talking about what's coming up for summer. I was explaining that I was going to Romania. I serve with a nonprofit there. I was just telling her all about the programs and things like that. And she was like, "Can I go?" And I was like, "Yes."
Where do I sign up? And then like completely like blacking out and not realizing, okay, I have 3 young children at home. I have a husband at home. I got to work some things out. I got in my car and I just prayed. I said, Lord, if this is what you truly want me to do, then you will make this happen. And I asked my husband, Ryan, I said, is this a possibility for us? Can I go? He works nights, so that's another level of difficulty to add to it too. He said, okay, if we can find childcare for at nighttime, then sure. My cousin happened to be in town. She was a teacher, but overseas in a different country teaching, and she was home. I mean, timing just worked out perfectly.
Yep.
And so God just literally like lined everything up, and in an extremely short amount of time.
The organization that I serve with in Romania is called Another Child Foundation. Kids from preschool all the way through 8th grade get served there. The school kind of steps in and helps families remain families and kids be successful in school, and then connects them to the Bible and how much God loves them.
We shared the same room for 10 days. Like every single night, we would just talk about our lives.
We kind of had like this vacuum situation of learning a lot about somebody in a short amount of time. So serving alongside people, you kind of can really see their heart. It's not really all that fun to do life and faith alone.
I mean, thank God for story teams.
Yeah.
Because we
would
truly
never
would not have met.
Yeah. Serving, whether in the church or serving in Romania, I really feel like that's like your faith in action.
It has truly opened up so many relationships, and building that connection, that family.
Life's hard. Life's just hard in general, and I think having people that can come alongside you, and when things go wrong, they can pray for you and check on you and watch over you, and you can do the same for them. You're not alone in those things, which is nice. Just living life, I think it's important to have people in your corner, especially people who love Jesus and love serving.
I love that story because it represents many stories like it, people who have stepped in and jumped in to be a part of what God is doing, not just to experience him, but to help others experience him. And so I love the story of Jessica and Katie. Even as I show you numbers this morning and you see numbers on the screen and we talk about growth, we can get real maybe excited and maybe even a little proud of the numbers in an unhealthy way. But I don't want to get stuck there, because when I think about the numbers, every number represents a person. Every person has a name. Every name has a story, and that story matters to God. Just like Jessica, just like Katie, just like you, just like me. So that's what this is all about. It's about the lives that are going to be impacted. When you go back to the story of Zacchaeus, it lands in 2 places. One, I want to take the pressure off for some this morning to not think about what I need to give, but just to simply receive the gift of grace and forgiveness. To just step into faith in Jesus. Let the rest take care of itself. Let generosity be the result once that takes place. You notice Jesus didn't show up on the scene and ask Zacchaeus for money. He didn't show up on the day and say, Zacchaeus, get down from the tree and show me the money. I need some cash. Yeah, that's not what he was interested in. He wasn't interested in his money. He was interested in his heart. He said, Zach, I want you. I want to know you. I want to come spend time at your house. So for some, that's the response today. The next chapter for you is just to simply step into a relationship with Jesus, to open the door, to accept the invitation, and to receive. And then for the rest of us, that would call ourselves a follower of Jesus, it's to pray and consider what is it he's calling us to give above what we already give, so that we can go beyond where we already are. And then watch him work in that. Watch him do something in us as a result.